Cal Gets Kicked Out by Sean B. One day, Anthony Fantano of The Needle Drop was listening intently to his vinyl copy of Ice Age's Plowing into the Field of Love when he heard the chilling sounds of children laughing and Cachuchesta attempting to be humorous. Anthony sprang up from his seat, put his vegan cigarette out on his tongue, which was really just a celery stick on fire, and screamed, "Chuchesta!" He ran into the other room to see Cal was carrying several of Anthony's 7 children on his back, including Michael, Miguel, Mickey, Edwin, and Anthony Jr., his oldest daughter. Michelle, with 2 L's, Michelle with 1 L, and Michael Jr., and Travis were all standing about, laughing and making merry times. Anthony yells, "Calbert Chuchestman, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Cal replies, "Just playing with some of your kids, Anthony." Anthony shook his head. No. You have no right. These are my kids. I have raised them from birth. You know nothing about my kids." Cal responds, But Anthony interrupts and says, "No. You know what, Cal? You've been living here for over 5 years now. I think it's time you move out. It's actually kind of insane that you moved in with me when I moved to this apartment in 2012. I just opened up one of the boxes and you were in there." Cal puts Anthony's kids down and puts on a visage of utter melancholy. Cal shakes his head, and Anthony's 7 children, plus the kids that Anthony disowned, all let out in awe. As Cal picks up his only worldly possessions, 4 pairs of the same sweater, and a vinyl copy of Matchbox 20's B-Sides and Rarities. As Cal was about to leave, Anthony said, "Hey." Cal turned around with hope in his eyes. "Don't forget this." Anthony threw a piece of paper reading "Whack Calzone" at Cal, and it danced about the air for an unusually long time before landing at Cal's feet. Cal picks it up and goes on his way. Several hours later, Cal found himself at a bar in New Haven, attempting to drown his sorrows in Blue Moon. Suddenly, his half-crossed eyes were scanning the bar. He saw a familiar face. It was intern Chris. "Chris," Cal said while removing his mustache for dramatic effect. Chris walks over to Cal. "Hi, Cal," Chris responds. "Listen there, bud. I got a problem. I could use your help," Cal confides. "Anthony kicked me out." Chris sneers and says, "Of course he did. He's a lying, backstabbing, no-goodin' son of a bitch with a federally protected blonde forest reserve on his head." "Actually, he shaved that off a few months back," Cal points out. "Oh, he did? Okay, I stopped watching after he gave Salad Days a 5. Cal nods his head. "Is that why you hate him now? Because he gave Salad Days a 5? Cal inquires. "No, it's mostly because he owes me money. I did a ton of appearances on his channel, and he said he'd pay me. He always ends up blowing that money on Dead Kennedy 7 inches and bids to spend one night alone with Neil Cicerega." Cal sips his drink and says, "So we both have reason to be mad at him. How are we going to get our revenge?" Chris rests his elbow on the bar to think, but then a bartender says, "Hey," and then Chris quickly lifted his elbow from the bar. "Sorry," Chris said. Later, Cal and Chris were in Chris's garage. "Okay, here's what we must do." Anthony reviews a lot of music, right? He owns a lot of vinyl and a ton of CDs and digital copies of albums. So here's something. How does he afford that junk on a YouTuber's salary? If we can prove that he's torrenting music online, we can present the evidence to Governor Malloy or Attorney General Jepsen, and it would be a huge scandal for Fantano. The Needle Drop would fold like origami forever. Later that night, Cal is parked across the street from Anthony's house, watching over it closely with a pair of binoculars. Chris is sitting in the back seat. "Any movement yet?" Chris asks. "No, not yet. He's got to leave the house sometime, right?" Cal wonders. "I know how to get him out of there," Chris says. "How?" Cal asks. "I need to make him angry. When he gets angry, he goes on drives to clear his mind. And the best way to get him angry is by introducing him to a meme rapper." Chris opens his laptop. Under another name, I'll send him a link to a single by this rapper named Pop Spiders, who has a mixtape dropping in 2025. Cal asks, "Why 11 years? Chris responds, "To build up the hype, I guess. Anyway, this guy first got famous because he broke into someone's house during a filming of MTV Cribs and pretended it was his own. And now on this new track of his, he has some bars that are bound to have Anthony's blood boiling, like Meanwhile, Anthony is angrily reading Pop Spider's bar on Rap Genius. Ayo, Pop Spider's in the mother shizzin' place. You can guess my mother shizzin' race? I'm black, yeah. I got a mouthful of hater juice. I spit it out, replace it with gin and juice. Remember, kids, never hate the Jews. Forgive them for killing Christ. They're unstoppable. What the hell is this? I've got cars full of money and haters full of cash. I've got hoes full of coins and sluts full of ass. No, I'm done, says Anthony. I can't handle this. He gets up and leaves his house. He gets into his car, slams the door, and drives off as Chris and Cal look in excitement. They sneak into Anthony's house through his unlocked front door and sneak steadily into his office. Do you know his password? He never let me near his computer, Cal pointed out. Of course I know his password. I spent so much time here as a teenager that Fantano is on more than his fair share of federally published lists. Chris said as he punched in the password. Cal and Chris collected the evidence they needed and went on their way. Several months later, Anthony Fantano, Cal Chuchesta, and Chris Capello were standing before an Allen County judge. He pounded the gavel with the utmost intensity. Mr. Chuchesta and Mr. Capello, you are hereby charged with breaking and entering and theft. How do you plead? The judge asks through his cloak, most deep and distinguished. We plead not guilty, Your Honor, Chris says, exasperated. Anthony's slick lawyer stands up and says, Your Honor, these two broke into my client's home and the evidence proves that. Let's help this nice jury get home, huh? An extremely bored jury sat in the room as flies buzzed around them every which way. Cal speaks up and says, Anthony was torrenting sangs. We were looking for justice, which causes the jury to gasp, and everyone looks over to them to see they once again look uninterested. See, even immediately after gasping, they look bored. Let's render this verdict. It doesn't matter what Mr. Fantano was doing. It's not admissible in the court anyway. The lawyer posits. I agree. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asks. A juror stands up and reads the verdict. We, the jury, hereby find the defendants Calvin Chuchesta and Chris Capello guilty on all counts. The judge faces a very broken down Cal and Chris. I hereby sentence you to serve time at the New Haven Niantic Annex forever, he says, while winking at Anthony Fantano. Chris yells, You're sending us to prison forever just because you wanted to nod to Anthony's catchphrase? The judge yells, Order! And yes. With that, Cal and Chris were hauled off to prison for the rest of their lives. Anthony occasionally visited Cal in prison, but he refused to speak to Chris. I just can't go there emotionally, Anthony said when asked by himself in the mirror.